The call came just before sunset, the kind of late afternoon light that turns the kitchen golden and makes you believe the world is still kind. "Hi, Mom," Sloane said, her voice sugar-coated but hollow underneath. "Dinner's postponed. Ethan had a work issue. You don't need to come tonight." Postponed. Not canceled. Postponed. The word sat heavy on my tongue. I glanced at the pot of chili bubbling on the stove, the steam carrying cinnamon, cumin, and a lifetime of Sunday memories. I'd spent the entire afternoon making it, Ethan's favorite since he was 10, and even set the table with the good china I hadn't used since Albert's funeral. My husband always said, "If you're going to celebrate, do it with both hands." But Sloane didn't sound like she wanted to celebrate anything. "Is Ethan all right?" I asked, lowering the flame. "He's fine," she said quickly. "Just work drama. Don't bother coming downtown. You should rest." And before I could say another word, she hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, ladle in hand, kitchen quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The chili simmered and popped softly, as if whispering that something didn't add up. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just being the lonely, overprotective widow my daughter-in-law liked to joke about when she thought I couldn't hear. But there was something in her tone, rushed, dismissive, like she was checking off a chore she couldn't stand doing. I turned off the stove. The smell of chili suddenly felt heavy, like an invitation that had no guests. Albert's old sweater hung on the back of the chair, the beige one that still carried the scent of lavender from the sachets I tucked in every drawer. I pulled it over my shoulders, picked up my grocery bag, and stepped outside. I told myself I just needed air. The October wind bit at my cheeks as I walked down Maple Avenue. The sky streaked in purple and orange like bruised glass. Streetlights flickered on one by one, and somewhere a saxophonist played near the cafe on the corner. I walked past families holding hands, laughter spilling from restaurant patios. The world seemed busy, warm, connected, and I felt like I was walking inside a bubble of silence. When Albert was alive, we would stroll these same streets on Fridays, hand in hand, pretending to argue about whether we should buy more tools for the store or more books for me. I smiled at the memory, and then the smile vanished when I saw it. Skyline and Vine, the rooftop restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows and twinkling fairy lights. The same place Ethan once said was too expensive for any normal night. It was chance, pure and cruel chance, that I walked past it at that exact moment, because through the glass, in a wash of golden light and laughter, I saw them. My son, my only child, and Sloane, my daughter-in-law. They sat at a long table with 8 others, laughing, drinking, raising glasses of red wine like it was New Year's Eve. There was a silver champagne bucket in the center, the kind they use for celebrations that last too long. Plates gleamed under the soft light. Shrimp cocktails, steaks seared to perfection, desserts that smoked and flamed. I froze. My grocery bag slipped slightly from my hand. Sloane wore a black dress I had never seen before, hair swept up like she belonged in one of those glossy magazines. Ethan sat beside her, arm around her chair, smiling in a way that cut through me. The same smile he used to give me when he'd show me his school projects, proud and innocent. Only now it looked rehearsed. And as I stood there, a 67-year-old woman in a lavender-scented sweater and comfortable shoes, I realized something terrible. I wasn't part of their world anymore. Their world had white plates the size of my stove, champagne that cost more than my monthly groceries, and a glow that came from being admired, not loved. I might have left right then, but the universe wasn't finished twisting the knife. Sloane raised her glass, said something to the table that made everyone laugh, and leaned to kiss Ethan on the cheek. They looked perfect, untouched, triumphant, and that's when I remembered. That morning, she'd asked to borrow my credit card. "Mom, she'd said sweetly. "I want to surprise Ethan with a little gift for his promotion, something special from both of us." I'd handed it to her without hesitation, because that's what mothers do, right? We believe. We trust. My chest tightened. I pulled out my phone and opened the bank app. The number glowed on the screen, $47,300, Skyline and Vine, pending. For a second, the world tilted. Then instinct took over. My finger hovered only a breath before pressing cancel card. Transaction blocked. A small, bitter flicker of satisfaction sparked inside me. The first warmth I'd felt all evening. Through the glass, I saw a waiter approach their table. He whispered something to Sloane. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Her face shifted. Surprise first, then confusion, then fury. She reached for her phone. Ethan did too. Both started typing frantically. And then, as if the air itself carried my gaze to her, Sloane looked up. Our eyes met through the glass. For a moment, time stopped. She saw me standing there. Old sweater, grocery bag, wind pushing at my gray hair. And the look she gave me wasn't guilt. It was disgust, like I was the stain on her perfect night. Ethan saw me next. His smile collapsed. His face went pale. He said something. I could see my name form on his lips, but Sloane gripped his hand, shook her head, and whispered something that froze him in place. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't cry. I simply watched, long enough for her to look away, for his eyes to fall to the table. Then I turned and walked into the cold night. The wind had teeth now. The grocery bag felt heavier with every block. My legs trembled, but not from the chill. City lights blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. Cars hissed by on wet asphalt, and laughter from restaurant patios followed me, like ghosts of a life I no longer belonged to. By the time I reached my house, my fingers were stiff, the key slipping twice before I managed to unlock the door. I stepped inside, shut everything behind me, and leaned against the wall, chest rising and falling like I'd run miles. Silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums. I turned off the kitchen light, sat down on the sofa, the same one Albert and I had bought 40 years ago when Ethan was just learning to walk. The fabric was frayed at the edges, the color faded to soft gray, but it held the imprint of every hug, every birthday, every Christmas morning. And now, it held me, a woman whose son toasted with stolen money while she stood in the cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying it. The soundless laughter behind the glass, the flash of Sloane's diamond earring as she tilted her head back, the way Ethan's eyes darted when he saw me. For the first time since Albert's death, I felt something heavier than grief. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was realization that a mother's love, when unguarded, can become her own blindness. I thought about every check I'd written, every, "of course, honey," I'd said when they needed something. I thought about how often I'd let myself be grateful for crumbs. A call on Sunday, a text on Mother's Day, a thanks mom sent from convenience, not love. Maybe I'd done this to myself. Maybe generosity without boundaries was just another form of surrender. At 3 a.m, I rose and stood by the kitchen window. Outside, the street was empty, only the amber glow of the street lamp and the slow drift of leaves across the asphalt. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had cooked, paid, forgiven. They trembled, but not from weakness anymore. On the counter, my phone screen still glowed faintly, the last notification frozen in place. Card canceled. Transaction blocked. For a brief, defiant second, I smiled. Because even if it was just a credit card, it was also something bigger. The first thing I'd taken back. The night was silent, but inside my chest, something had shifted. Something small, sharp, and alive. And though I didn't know it yet, that simple act One tap on a screen was the first step toward everything that would come next. The confrontation, the truth, the revenge that wasn't really revenge at all. It was the beginning of my awakening. Because that night, standing in my kitchen with the ghost of Albert somewhere in the quiet, I whispered to myself, if this is who they are when I give them everything, let's see who they become when I give them nothing. And the silence finally answered back. When I woke the next morning, the smell of chili still hung in the kitchen, cold now, congealed on the stovetop like a memory that refused to leave. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and my heart ached in a way I didn't know hearts could. I told myself it couldn't be true, that maybe there was some misunderstanding. Ethan would never let this happen. Not my boy. But mothers lie to themselves better than anyone. We train for it all our lives. By noon, I'd brewed 3 cups of coffee and poured each one down the sink, unable to swallow. My phone buzzed. Skyline and Vine, $47,300. Charge declined. My finger hovered over the notification, and I felt something twist inside me. It was official now. There was no doubt. They had used my card. They had lied to me. And still, the worst part wasn't the money. It was that look Sloane gave me through the glass, as if I were something she'd scrape off her shoe. That image burned behind my eyes all day, until I decided I couldn't sit and stew anymore. I showered, brushed my hair, and changed into a navy blouse and gray slacks. The same outfit I'd worn to Ethan's graduation. Not fancy, but decent. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't seem old. She looked steady, determined. By the time I reached downtown, night had fallen again. Chicago's lights shimmered across the river like gold dust scattered on black velvet. The restaurant loomed ahead, all glass and laughter, the hum of privilege vibrating in the air. The doorman glanced at me, as if he wasn't sure whether to stop me. But I kept walking. The sound of my sensible shoes on the marble floor was swallowed by the clink of wine glasses and the low thrum of jazz. And there they were, Ethan and Sloane, seated at the same table as before, surrounded by their glittering circle. Sloane in another sleek dress, this one white, like she was auditioning for sainthood. Ethan laughing too loudly, trying to fill whatever emptiness lingered between them. I approached the table slowly, each step tightening the invisible knot in my chest. Sloane saw me first. The color drained from her face. She leaned toward Ethan, whispering something urgent. He turned, and when he saw me, his smile collapsed. "Good evening," I said, calm, deliberate, every word balanced on the edge of my breath. The table fell silent. Even the jazz seemed to hush. "Mom," Ethan stammered, half standing. You didn't have to come." I looked straight at him. "The dinner was postponed, remember?" A ripple of discomfort crossed the table. One of their friends, Jessica, the one who always wore too much perfume, pretended to cough. Sloane forced a brittle smile. "Oh, Mom, what a surprise. Plans changed last minute, and we didn't want to bother you. You know, late nights can be tiring. At your age." At your age. The word sliced clean, polite cruelty dressed as concern. I nodded slowly. "At my age," I repeated. "Yes, of course." My eyes dropped to the table, the half-eaten steak, the champagne bottles sweating in their silver bucket, the molten desserts, the luxury. 10 people. 10 plates that probably cost more than my entire grocery budget for the month. I took out my phone. "Tell me something, Sloane. How much did this dinner cost?" She blinked, feigning confusion. "Excuse me?" $47,300, I said clearly, letting the numbers hang between us. "That's how much you charged to my credit card tonight." The air thickened. Forks froze mid-air. Ethan's hand shot out, gripping my wrist gently. "Mom, please, not here. Let's talk outside." I pulled my hand free. "No, Ethan, here." in front of all your friends who seem to enjoy my hospitality." Sloane's smile cracked. "Mom, don't make a scene." "Don't make a scene?" My voice trembled, not from fear, but from something far older. Decades of swallowing words. "You lied to me. You excluded me. You used my money for a party I wasn't even invited to." Her tone hardened. "Nobody forced you to give us the card. You offered. You always offer. Because you need to feel useful. You can't stand not being the center of attention." A murmur passed through the table. Shocked whispers. A gasp. I felt heat rising in my throat, but I held my ground. "You think generosity is weakness? That kindness is some disease of the old?" Sloane folded her arms. "Honestly, yes. You act like a victim every time you spend a dime. If it bothers you so much, stop paying for everything." I turned to Ethan, desperate for some trace of the boy I'd raised. "Ethan, do you think that too?" He looked at the floor. "Mom, please, you're embarrassing us." And there it was, the final nail. Embarrassing us. As if my existence were some outdated accessory ruining their image. Something inside me snapped quietly. Not a scream, not a tear, just a click, like a lock turning from the inside. I reached into my purse and took out another credit card, the one I'd kept for emergencies. I laid it on the table, next to the champagne bottle. "Settle the bill with this," I said softly. "It's the last thing you'll ever use of mine." Sloane smirked. "Whatever you say, Mom." I looked around the table, at the startled faces, the uncomfortable glances, the sudden awareness that they were witnessing something raw and irreversible. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my voice steady, "because it just cost you much more than you can imagine." And then I walked away. In the taxi, I didn't cry right away. The city blurred past, glittering towers reflected on the river like nothing bad ever happened inside them. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, the way I used to sit in church when I was young. When the driver asked where I was headed, my voice came out flat. Home. As the car rolled through the wet streets, I finally let the tears fall. Quiet, controlled, unstoppable. By the time I reached my house, my blouse clung damp to my skin. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, my body shaking. The silence roared in my ears. I sank onto the sofa, that same gray fabric where I'd watched Ethan take his first steps, where Albert and I had toasted every milestone. The ghosts of those moments surrounded me, and for the first time in 5 years, since the day Albert's heart stopped in our kitchen, I felt completely alone. But in that loneliness, something stirred. Not despair, not yet. More like a question I had never dared to ask. How long had this been happening? How many lies had I swallowed because it was easier than fighting? I got up, walked to the dining table, and pulled out the small folder I kept in the nightstand. The one with our bank statements. I'd never looked at them closely. I'd trusted Ethan. He was my son, my blood. I spread the papers out, one by one, under the yellow glow of the lamp. January, department store, $18,500. February, luxury spa, $12,800. March, travel agency, Cancun, $80,400. April, Cartier jewelry, $43,200. May, contemporary furniture, $50,600. June, Michelin star restaurant, $22,100. Each line felt like a slap. By the time I added them up, the total blurred before my eyes. $340,000. $340,000. Spent in 6 months. Money Albert and I had earned by opening our hardware store at dawn every morning for 30 years. Money meant to keep me safe in old age. Money. I'd saved so Ethan wouldn't have to worry about me, and they'd burned it like confetti. My hands trembled as I poured a glass of water, but it didn't help. My stomach twisted. I thought I was going to faint, until I remembered the tablet Ethan sometimes used when he came by. He said his phone battery always died, so he logged in with his account synced. I picked it up from the living room shelf, turned it on, and the screen came alive. His messages, his apps, all still there. My heart pounded. I didn't want to look. Some part of me begged not to. But another part, the part that had seen Sloane smirk, needed to know everything. I opened a chat labeled The Girls. Sloane. Look at the necklace I bought. Cartier, obviously. The old woman won't even notice. Jessica. Girl, you're my hero. I could never ask my MIL for that much cash. Sloane. It's not asking. It's taking what I deserve. She's loaded and doesn't use it. Better I enjoy it than it rot in a savings account. My vision blurred. I scrolled further. Sloane. I told Ethan if he doesn't support me against his mom, I'm leaving. The fool would do anything not to lose me. Jessica. You're a strategist, babe. Sloane. Not a strategist. Smart. When the old woman dies, the house is ours. Already talked to Ethan. Just a matter of time. The old woman. I covered my mouth, choking back a sound that wasn't quite a sob. My name, my existence, reduced to a label, an obstacle. I opened Ethan's private messages next. Ethan. Mom asked about the 87K Cancun trip. Sloane. What did you tell her? Ethan. That it was a bank error. They're fixing it. Sloane. Good. As long as she keeps believing, we'll keep living the good life. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I didn't even flinch. That night, in the bathroom, I leaned over the sink and vomited. Not from sickness, but from disgust. The son I carried for 9 months, the boy who used to draw me cards that said best mom in the world, had turned me into a walking ATM. When I finally looked in the mirror, the woman staring back was someone else. Eyes swollen, hair messy, but alive in a way she hadn't been in years. I won't be the bank anymore, I whispered. I'll be the reckoning. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, surrounded by bank statements, shattered glass, and the faint smell of cold chili. The ruins of a lifetime of love misplaced. And as the first light touched the windows, I realized something that would carry me through everything that came next. I hadn't been generous. I'd been afraid, and fear, once named, starts to die. Morning arrived like a judgment. The sunlight didn't warm, it exposed. It poured through the blinds, laying bars of gold across the bank statements scattered on my table. Across the shards of glass I still hadn't swept from the floor. I sat there in my robe, gripping a mug of cold coffee, staring at numbers that no longer made sense. My life had been reduced to decimals and lies. $340,000, the price of love, loyalty, and blindness. For years I had confused generosity with love. I thought if I gave enough, they would keep me close. But all I had done was build a cage and hand them the key. And yet, even in that wreckage, a strange calm began to rise. It wasn't acceptance, it was clarity. For the first time I could see the truth, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Ruth Delgado, my neighbor, standing there holding a pot of chicken soup and a face that looked like concern carved into kindness. I heard something broke last night, she said softly. Figured you might need someone to talk to. Ruth had lived next door for 20 years, widowed like me. Her laugh could cut through any storm, but her eyes always carried the weight of something unsaid. I invited her in. The soup smelled of cilantro and comfort, exactly what my kitchen had been missing. As we ate, I told her everything. Not just the dinner, the bills, the lies, the text messages. She listened without interrupting, her spoon still, her gaze unwavering. When I finished, she let out a long breath. You know, I once had a son like Ethan. That made me look up. Ruth smiled sadly. He forged my signature on a loan. Lost my house. I started over at 58 in a studio apartment with peeling wallpaper. She tapped the table with her finger. Don't you dare make my mistake, Marion. Don't forgive what you haven't named. Her words hit deep, Clean, direct, undeniable. Then what do I do? I asked. You stop crying, she said, and you start documenting. That evening, I followed her advice. I printed every statement, saved every screenshot, copied every message. I organized them into neat piles, labeled in black ink, fraudulent charges, messages, assets at risk. It felt strangely empowering, like building armor out of paper. Still, I knew anger alone wasn't enough. If I wanted to end this, I had to be smarter than the people who took advantage of me. That's when Ruth said, "You need a lawyer, a good one." And I know exactly who. Grace Patel didn't look like any lawyer I'd met before. No steel gray suit, no walls of law books. Just calm precision in a navy blazer, and eyes that could measure a person's soul before they even spoke. Her office smelled of lemon polish and quiet confidence. She listened as I laid out the entire story: the stolen money, the public humiliation, the emotional blackmail. When I finished, she didn't immediately respond. She flipped through the pages of evidence, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "Marion, this is not just family drama. This is financial abuse, elder exploitation. It's real and it's prosecutable." The words landed heavy. Elder exploitation. I hated how clinical it sounded, as if I were a statistic instead of a woman who'd trusted too much. Grace saw my discomfort. "You're not a victim," she said firmly. "You're a witness, and witnesses take back control by telling the truth on paper." She began outlining steps. Secure all accounts. Remove Ethan as co-signer on anything: house, insurance, utilities. Transfer part of the funds into a protected trust under my name only. Update my will. That last one caught my attention. "My will?" I asked. Grace nodded. "Right now, Ethan and Sloan would inherit everything. You need to revise it. Leave them something if you choose. But make sure they understand it's conditional on respect, not entitlement." I thought of Sloan's message. When the old woman dies, the venom of it burned fresh again. "Yes," I said quietly. "Let's change it." Grace smiled, small and proud. "Good. Because revenge doesn't always need fire. Sometimes it's just a line of ink on the right document." For the next week, I moved through my days like a woman possessed by purpose. I met with bankers, froze accounts, set up alerts, moved titles, closed credit lines. Each task was another chain unfastened. At night, Ruth would sit at my table, sipping tea, watching me sign papers like a general preparing for war. "You're scaring me," she teased once. "Good," I said, smiling for the first time in days. They should be scared too. When Ethan finally called, his voice dripped with forced warmth. "Mom, haven't heard from you all week. Sloane's been worried sick." I almost laughed. "Has she?" He hesitated. "Listen, about that dinner, there's been a misunderstanding. The restaurant overcharged us. We're disputing it." "Really?" I said. "Because I have the receipts, Ethan. Every single one of them." Silence. "Mom," he said softly, "you don't have to make this ugly." "Ugly," I repeated. "Son, it already is." He sighed, exasperated. "Sloane thinks maybe you're just overwhelmed since Dad died. You know, emotionally. It's normal to get confused about money. Gaslighting. Gentle, practiced, professional. Sloane's fingerprints all over it." I kept my tone even. "I may be old, Ethan, but I'm not confused. I'm done funding your lifestyle." There was a pause, then his voice broke. "Mom, please, don't do this." But I had already decided. I wasn't his safety net anymore. That night, I called Grace. "I want to test something," I said. She listened as I explained my idea. A small bait, harmless in itself, but revealing. We set it up together. A new gold credit card under a limited account. Only $5,000 total. Just enough to be tempting. The next morning, I texted Sloane. "I'm sorry about last week. I overreacted. Please tell Ethan I want to make it up to you both. This card is for you, for emergencies. Within an hour, she replied with heart emojis. Grace's software tracked the transactions. Within 24 hours, there were 5 declined purchases. Versace, Saks Fifth Avenue, a spa in Miami, a 5-star restaurant tasting menu. In total, $32,700 attempted in less than a day. Grace whistled when she saw the report. She doesn't even try to hide it. I felt no satisfaction, only confirmation. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was who she was. The next step was delicate. Grace drafted new inheritance papers. One genuine, one fake. The genuine version left my assets in a trust for charity and small sums to Ethan under supervision. The fake version, however, looked like a dream come true for Sloan. Full property rights, the house, the remaining accounts, all to be signed at a family dinner. I would invite them to witness the signature. It's bait, I told Grace. If she's as greedy as we think, she'll come running. Grace nodded. And you'll have witnesses when she shows her true colors. Ruth volunteered to help. She'd attend as one of the witnesses. She even baked cookies for the occasion, as if we were throwing a church picnic instead of setting a trap. The invitation went out a week later. Family dinner. Discussion of future plans. Sloan replied within minutes, "Of course, we'll be there." I imagined her reading the words, "future plans," already picturing my signature handing her everything she wanted. For days afterward, I could almost hear the clock ticking toward that dinner. My nerves pulsed with a strange blend of dread and anticipation. But one afternoon, as I walked past the bakery downtown, I caught my reflection in the glass. The same reflection that once looked broken outside Skyline and Vine. Now it looked different. Not younger, not happier, just awake. I had been the soft-hearted mother, the easy mark, the quiet giver. But now I was something else, not cruel, but wise. Ruth called it revenge. Grace called it strategy. I called it self-respect on paper. The night before the dinner, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same spot, same light. But the papers in front of me this time weren't bills. They were boundaries, property deeds, legal notices. A will that protected my name, my work, and my worth. Ruth poured tea beside me. "You nervous?" "Not really," I said. "More resolved." She smiled. "That's the best kind of revenge, you know. The quiet kind." I looked down at the pen in my hand. Albert's old Parker, still heavy, still smooth. When I signed my new will that night, the sound of ink on paper felt like thunder muffled under silk. A promise kept to myself. The trap was ready. The papers were in place. And for the first time in months, I slept without fear. Because now, I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the architect. And the next time Sloan looked me in the eye, she wouldn't see a weak old woman. She'd see the storm she created. Standing tall, holding her own paper shield. The night of the dinner arrived like the calm before a storm. Beautiful, deliberate, and merciless. By 5 p.m., my house smelled of chili and cornbread, the same scents that had filled every family gathering when Albert was alive. I wanted the room to feel familiar, safe, deceptively safe. I had spent the whole day preparing, polishing the silverware, ironing the linen runner, arranging yellow chrysanthemums, Albert's favorite, in the center of the table. The candles flickered softly, their reflections dancing on the crystal glasses. To anyone else, it looked like a cozy family dinner, but to me, it was a stage. And tonight, the performance would reveal who everyone truly was. Grace arrived first. Efficient, composed, a folder tucked under her arm like a weapon. Ruth came next, carrying her famous oatmeal cookies and a smile that hid more steel than anyone suspected. They were my witnesses, not just legally, but morally. We rehearsed the plan once more. The inheritance dinner. Grace would quietly record the proceedings with her phone placed near the flowers. Ruth's role was simple: to stay calm, observe, and confirm whatever was said. At 6:15, headlights swept across the window. A sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway. "They're here," Ruth murmured. Sloane entered first, wrapped in a white blazer and the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her a throne. Her perfume announced her before her voice did: sharp, expensive, and intrusive. Ethan followed, looking exhausted, eyes shadowed with something between guilt and dread. He forced a smile. "Hey, Mom. Thanks for having us." "Always," I said, offering my hand to Sloane. "You look lovely." She smiled, all teeth. "Thank you. We were surprised you wanted to have us over after everything." "Oh, I believe in new beginnings," I said evenly. "That's what tonight's about." Her eyes flickered toward the stack of folders on the sideboard. The bait. Dinner began with pleasantries, though the tension was so thick you could have sliced it with a butter knife. Ruth complimented the chili. Ethan asked about my garden. Sloane commented on how cozy the house felt, as if comfort were something to pity. After the dishes were cleared, I placed a leather folder in the center of the table. "Before dessert," I said, "I wanted to discuss something important: future arrangements. I'm updating my will, and I'd like you both to witness it." Sloane's spine straightened. "Oh," she said, trying to sound casual. "Of course. That's thoughtful." Grace, sitting quietly to my right, opened her notepad. "Everything we say tonight will be documented," she said smoothly. "Just for clarity." Sloane's smile didn't falter, but her pulse visibly jumped in her neck. I took out 2 folders, one genuine, one fake. Both sealed, both identical except for the contents. I placed the fake one closer to her side. "These outline how the estate will be managed," I said. "The house, the savings, the store building. I just want transparency." Sloane's perfectly manicured fingers brushed over the envelope. "Naturally. Family should always be transparent." I nodded. "Exactly." I turned to Ethan. "Would you like to open it?" He hesitated. "Maybe we can talk privately first." But Sloane had already begun sliding the papers out, eyes flicking across the text like a wolf scenting blood. The words she read were bait: transfer of ownership, beneficiaries. Ethan Grant and Sloane Hart Grant, joint heirs. Her breath quickened. "This is—" She looked up, astonished. "Mom, this is incredibly generous." I smiled gently. "Is it?" She nodded eagerly. "You're doing the right thing. Family belongs together." Across the table, Grace's pen glided silently over her pad. Ruth leaned forward, pouring more tea. "So that means you two will take care of the property, right? Taxes, upkeep, all that?" Sloane barely looked up. "Of course," she said. "We already have plans." "Plans?" I asked. She hesitated, too late to retreat. "Well, we thought maybe it's time to renovate, maybe sell the place eventually. You shouldn't have to worry about anything." My voice softened. "Sell it?" But this was Albert's home, Ethan's childhood home. Her tone stayed sugary, but her eyes hardened. "And it's beautiful, but old. We can build something new, something modern. Albert would want you to be comfortable." Ruth's eyebrows lifted slightly. The signal we'd agreed on. She was taking the bait deeper. I leaned back, folding my hands. "Comfortable. That's an interesting word." Sloane gave a light laugh. "Come on, Marion, don't overthink it. We're family. We'll make sure you're taken care of." "Taken care of," I repeated, as if tasting it. "Like you did at Skyline and Vine?" The room went dead quiet. Ethan froze. Grace stopped writing. Ruth looked down at her teacup. Sloane's face stiffened. "That's ancient history." "It was 3 weeks ago," I said. She shrugged. "We've apologized." "No," I said, calm but sharp. "You explained. You didn't apologize." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want from us?" "The truth," I said. "Tonight, in front of witnesses." Sloane laughed. too loud, too brittle. Witnesses? Marion, this isn't court. You're being dramatic. Grace's voice cut in, low and professional. Actually, Mrs. Hart, under Illinois law, misappropriation of funds from a senior relative can be prosecuted as a civil matter. Tonight, you were invited here to clarify intent and acknowledgement. Sloane blinked, color draining from her face. What are you talking about? I gestured toward Grace's folder. The records, the screenshots, the declined charges from the new card I gave you. You remember that one? Ethan turned to her, confusion morphing into realization. Sloane, what card? She went rigid. It's nothing. A misunderstanding. Grace slid a printout across the table. Within 24 hours of receiving it, there were attempted transactions totaling $32,700. Versace, Saks, spa services, fine dining, all declined. Ethan's mouth fell open. You did what? Don't look at me like that, she snapped. I thought it was a gift. Your mother? My mother what? He demanded. She gave you an emergency card, and you tried to spend $30,000. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. I've done everything for us. For us? I said quietly. Or for you? Sloane slammed her palm on the table. You can't talk to me like this. You're an ungrateful, manipulative old woman. You've been controlling Ethan his whole life, playing the victim so he never leaves you. Her words echoed like a gunshot in the still room. Ruth's teacup rattled. Ethan went pale. I stayed still, my hands folded, my voice soft. And yet here you are, begging for what belongs to me. Sloane's lips trembled, but her pride refused to break. You'll regret this. You can't prove? Grace opened another folder. Screenshots from your group chat, she said, her tone clinical, including the messages where you referred to Mrs. Grant as the old woman and discussed inheriting her house. Would you like me to read them aloud? Sloane's breath hitched. You invaded my privacy. No, I said. You left it open on my tablet. Ethan's voice cracked. Sloane, tell me it isn't true. She didn't answer. Her silence was the loudest confession of all. Grace closed the folder. Legally, Mrs. Grant has grounds for both civil recovery and a restraining order. But tonight, she wanted the chance for you to tell the truth willingly. I turned to Ethan, my voice softening. Son, look at me. He lifted his eyes, glassy and broken. I didn't invite you here to destroy you, I said. I invited you here to show you what love without boundaries becomes. Ruin. Sloane stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You're all insane. She grabbed her purse. Ethan reached for her, but she pulled away. Don't you dare follow me. The front door slammed so hard the windows shuddered. Silence filled the house again, but this time it wasn't oppressive. It was relief. Ethan sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. His voice cracked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping her. I touched his shoulder gently. I know what you thought. And now you know what it cost. Grace closed her folders. Everything is recorded, she said quietly. If you want to proceed legally, we can. I nodded, but my eyes stayed on my son. We'll see, I murmured. For now, I just need truth and space. When they left, the candles had burned low, dripping wax like frozen tears. I stood alone in the kitchen, the echo of the slammed door still lingering in the walls. The chili pot sat cold on the stove, uneaten. Ruth came up beside me, slipping her arm through mine. Well, she said, half smiling, that was one hell of a dinner. I exhaled slowly, the last one I'll ever host for them. Through the window, I could see the empty driveway, the SUV gone, the night finally still, and for the first time in years, the house felt like mine again. Not haunted, not indebted, mine. I whispered, almost to myself. They thought I was weak. They forgot who taught them strength. Ruth squeezed my arm gently. They won't forget again. Outside, a breeze stirred the chrysanthemums, scattering yellow petals across the porch, like confetti for a victory no one clapped for, but one deeply earned. And under that quiet, beneath the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock, I could feel it. Justice, humming in the bones of my house. I had been invisible once, not anymore. The morning after the dinner, the house was silent. The kind of silence that didn't ache anymore. It simply was. The candles had melted down to nubs. The table was still set, as if waiting for a forgiveness that would never arrive. The air smelled faintly of chili and chrysanthemum stems, and beneath it, something else, freedom. I stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the gray light spill across the yard. The leaves were turning, the first hints of gold and rust. A season ending, another beginning. My phone buzzed. Ethan. For a moment I just stared at his name. The screen pulsed softly, waiting. I almost didn't answer. But blood has its gravity. Mom? His voice cracked, rough from sleeplessness. Can we talk? I hesitated. Come by at noon. He exhaled. Thank you. He arrived right on time. No Sloan, no pretense. Just my son standing on the porch with eyes swollen from guilt. His hands trembled slightly when I opened the door. Hi, he said, barely audible. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked around as if seeing the house for the first time. The photos on the wall, the faded sofa, the coffee table Albert had built with his own hands. His voice was thin. It's been a while since I've really looked at this place. Maybe you were too busy looking at other things, I said quietly. He winced, but didn't argue. We sat at the table, the same one where Sloane had lost her composure less than 24 hours ago. I noticed his eyes flicker to the empty chair beside him, and for a second, pity threatened to soften me. But pity is not the same as love. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, for all of it. I should have stopped her. You should have seen me, I interrupted. Not as a wallet, not as a problem, but as your mother. He swallowed hard. You're right. The words hung there, trembling between confession and surrender. I took out a folder from the sideboard, the real one. Grace had dropped it off that morning, bound neatly with red ribbon. I met with Grace today, I said. She drew up 2 options. He frowned. Options? I slid the papers toward him. For consequences. He hesitated, opening the first document. Grace's clear handwriting labeled it Option 1, full legal pursuit. If I choose that, I said evenly, you and Sloane face a civil lawsuit for financial abuse and misappropriation. You could lose your home, your job, your reputation. Everything. He paled, flipping to the second. Option 2. Payment plan and conditional forgiveness. $50,000 in 30 days, I said. Sell the car, the jewelry, whatever you have left. Then $5,000 a month for 4 years. You move out of the condo. You go to therapy. You rebuild your own life. No more money from me. No asking, no giving. You follow the plan, and we talk again. He stared at the papers for a long time. The ticking clock sounded louder than his breathing. Mom. His voice trembled. That's fair. Brutal, but fair. Love without boundaries, I said softly, is just permission to keep hurting each other. He closed his eyes, nodded, and picked up the pen. When he signed, his hand shook. I watched the ink dry. Thick, final, absolute. It wasn't vengeance. It was correction. He set the pen down, exhaling as if a weight had been nailed to paper. Sloane won't like this, he said. Sloane liked too many things she didn't deserve, I replied. This time, you'll have to decide who you want to be without her. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I think I already have. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet, almost antiseptic. Grace handled the legal details with precision. Ethan followed every step. Sold his car, paid the first installment, terminated the condo lease. The real estate agent called me herself. amused at how fast it sold. Apparently the buyer paid in full, she said. You must be lucky. I smiled faintly. Luck has nothing to do with it. The deposit, $920,000, went straight into my account. For the first time in years, my finances were clean, untouched, entirely mine. Sloane called once. I didn't pick up. She left a voice message, half apology, half venom. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said. You've ruined Ethan's life. You'll die alone with your stupid chili and your moral high ground. I deleted it before she finished. Some words deserve no shelf space in memory. By December, Ethan had moved into a modest apartment downtown. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, a view of the L tracks. I helped him move boxes but didn't stay long. He offered to make coffee. I declined. I'm not ready to be comfortable here, I told him. He understood. We spoke once a week. Phone calls that started awkwardly but grew softer over time. He told me about his therapy sessions, how he was learning to see manipulation, to unlearn guilt. She always knew how to make me feel like I owed her something, he said once, even when I was the one being used. I stayed silent, letting him find his own words. Healing isn't inherited, it's earned. One evening, he came over with a small box. Inside was a pastry, slightly overbaked, dusted unevenly with powdered sugar. Made it myself, he said sheepishly. My therapist says learning to create something simple can help rebuild trust. I figured I'd start with you. I took a bite. It was terrible, but I smiled anyway. Needs work, I said gently. He laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him since this began. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who built Lego houses for me on the living room floor and believed they'd stand forever. A week later, I met Grace at the bakery, where Ruth sometimes volunteered. We discussed the finalization of the trust, the closing of the condo sale, and the donation. I'm naming the foundation the Albert Grant Fund, I told her, for women over 60 who've suffered financial abuse. Grants, therapy, housing support. Small, but real. Grace smiled. You're turning pain into policy, Marion. That's power. I laughed softly. No, that's self-respect with paperwork. That spring, I reopened the old storefront Albert once used for hardware supplies. I painted the walls cream, replaced the dusty shelves with display cases, and hung a wooden sign above the door. Never too late. It wasn't just a bakery. It was a rebirth. Ruth came every morning to help. The first batch of carrot cake smelled of cinnamon and victory. The shop filled with faces I didn't know, but somehow recognized. Women who'd lived too long in silence, men learning humility, neighbors who simply wanted warmth. Some bought pastries, others just sat and talked. I listened. I poured coffee. I told no one my full story, but they felt it in the air, that this place was built from ashes and love's harder lessons. Ethan started visiting every Friday. He'd come after work, apron still dusty from the architectural firm's models. He always ordered the same thing, apple pie. One evening, he slid an envelope across the counter. Final payment, he said. $5,000 even. I raised an eyebrow. You're ahead of schedule, he smiled. For once. When I opened the envelope, I found not just the check, but a handwritten note. Thanks for teaching me that love also says no. My throat tightened. I reached over the counter, touched his hand gently. You're learning, Ethan. That's all I ever wanted. He nodded. Mom, I met someone. Her name's Patricia. She's quiet. Teaches elementary school. She doesn't want money, just honesty. I smiled. Then maybe you finally learned what wealth really is. That night, after closing the bakery, I sat by the window as twilight settled over the street. The sign outside glowed softly, never too late. The hum of laughter from the cafe across the road drifted through the air. For the first time, I felt peace. Not the fragile peace of denial, but the solid one that comes after truth. People think revenge is satisfaction, but they're wrong. The real satisfaction is in rebuilding, brick by brick, choice by choice, until you recognize yourself again. As I turned off the lights, I whispered to Albert's photo on the wall, "We did it. We taught him to stand, even if it took breaking first." Outside, the street lamp flickered, catching the reflection of my bakery window. The same reflection that once showed a woman betrayed behind glass. Now, it showed a woman free. Love hadn't disappeared. It had simply learned where to live. And as I locked the door for the night, I said quietly to the darkness, "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering, with boundaries." A full year has passed since that October night, when I stood outside a restaurant window and saw my world collapse. A year since my son looked at me and saw not a mother, but an obstacle. A year since I canceled a credit card and unknowingly saved my own life. Now, the mornings begin differently. I wake up to the smell of bread rising, to the soft clinking of cups in my bakery downstairs. Never too late. That name still makes me smile. Albert would have loved it. Simple, true, and defiant. The scent of cinnamon fills the air as the first customers arrive. I flip the sign to open and unlock the door, and sunlight spills over the wooden counter, painting everything in gold. Ruth is already there, humming an old tune from the 70s while icing cupcakes. Her apron says "Bite Back," a gift she made herself. "Morning, boss," she teases. "I'm the baker," I say. "You're the boss." We laugh, the kind of laughter that doesn't echo from pain anymore. It glows from peace. The bakery has become more than a business. It's a refuge. A quiet revolution wrapped in sugar and spice. Every morning women come here, widows, retirees, grandmothers, and somehow, over coffee and scones, they begin to tell their stories. Stories of sons who borrowed too much and never repaid, of daughters who forgot birthdays, of the way silence becomes a habit when you feel invisible. They talk, and I listen. Sometimes I don't say much, just hand them a slice of cake and let them taste something that isn't bitterness. Because I know what it means to swallow disappointment until it hardens behind your ribs. They often ask, "How did you do it, Marion? How did you start over at 68? And I tell them the truth. You don't wait for courage. You begin scared. Then I point to the sign above the door. Never too late. And they always smile, a little steadier than before. By spring, the bakery had grown. Local newspapers wrote about us. A widow's sweet revolution. Grace became a regular customer, bringing new clients who needed advice about wills, boundaries, and second chances. "I tell them your story," she confessed once, sipping her latte. "About the woman who turned betrayal into blueprint." I laughed. "Blueprints are your department, Grace." "Not anymore," she said softly. "They're yours too." I didn't realize it then, but she was right. My life had become an architecture of lessons, built from what I refused to let destroy me. Ethan kept his promise. Every month, a letter arrived. Sometimes with a check, sometimes with words far more valuable. He was still in therapy, still working, still rebuilding. The payments no longer mattered. What mattered was that he was showing up. We had coffee on Sundays, not out of obligation, but choice. He helped repaint the bakery one weekend. His hands covered in white dust, his laughter real again. "Mom," he said as he rolled paint across the wall, "I finally understand what Dad meant when he said love has to stand on its own 2 feet. I looked at him, grown, humbled, alive, and felt a warmth that was no longer laced with guilt. He wasn't my responsibility anymore. He was my son, simply, freely, wholly. One Sunday in June, he came by carrying a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" I asked. "An anniversary gift," he said, grinning. "Anniversary of what?" of the night you saved yourself. Inside was a photo album, dark leather, gold lettering, our story, Chapter 2. The first pages held old memories. Albert lifting Ethan on his shoulders, birthdays in the yard, the three of us laughing in the sunlight of another lifetime. Then came new ones, the bakery opening, Ruth and me cutting the ribbon, Ethan helping paint the walls, us drinking coffee under the never too late sign. At the end, one blank page, and written across it in Ethan's hand. Mom, thank you for teaching me that love isn't measured by what we give away, but by what we refuse to lose. I didn't even try to stop the tears. As the months passed, the bakery began to sponsor small workshops. Grace helped organize them. Financial safety for seniors, how to say no with dignity, healing from emotional theft. Women came from all over the city. Some left with new bank accounts. Others just left with the courage to look someone in the eye and say, no more. We created something real, not just a business, but a movement. And every time someone told me, you changed my life, I corrected them gently. No, I said, you changed yours. I just baked the cookies. By autumn, the bakery's walls were filled with photographs of smiling faces, of women who had found their own small freedoms. Above the register hung a framed quote from Albert. Kindness is a choice. Boundaries are too. One afternoon, a familiar voice called from the door. Mom? Ethan stood there holding a bouquet of wildflowers and a shy smile. I hugged him, breathing in the scent of flower and memory. You look different, I said. I feel different, he replied. And I want to tell you something. He took a deep breath. I met someone. Her name's Patricia. She's a teacher. She doesn't need saving, and she doesn't expect me to fix her. She just listens. That's a good start, I said. He laughed. She insists on paying her half of everything, even coffee. Then she's definitely a keeper. He blushed, like he used to when he was a teenager. I don't want to rush things, but I wanted you to know. This time, I'll do it right. I smiled. Then you already are. That evening, after he left, I sat in the bakery alone. Lights dimmed, city quiet. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady, like applause for something invisible. I looked around the room, the glowing never too late sign, the jars of sugar lined neatly, the flour dust shimmering under the bulbs. This place was once a dream Albert and I used to joke about. When we're old, we'll open a cafe and argue about recipes. Now, it was real. It was mine. And it was enough. 6 months later, the bakery hosted a small event. Never too late, 1 year of stories. The tables were filled with customers, neighbors, even local news reporters. Ruth wore pearls for the first time in decades. Grace made a speech. Then it was my turn. I stood behind the counter, hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from gratitude too big to hold. When this started, I said, I thought I'd lost everything. My husband, my son, my purpose. But sometimes loss is the teacher we never wanted but always needed. Because pain, when faced, becomes direction. And direction, when followed, becomes life. I paused, looking at the crowd. The faces lit with hope, the hum of quiet agreement. This bakery isn't just about sweets, I continued. It's about second chances, the kind that taste of cinnamon and courage. Applause filled the room. Ruth winked at me from the back. Ethan, standing by the door, was clapping the loudest. Later that night, when everyone had gone, I locked the door and sat by the window. The moonlight spilled across the counter, touching the open photo album. I turned to the last blank page and wrote in careful script, 1 year of peace. 1 year of learning that love needs boundaries, forgiveness needs truth, and dignity needs no permission. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Then I closed it. Outside, the streetlights flickered over puddles, reflecting the bakery sign. Never too late, glowing softly against the dark. For a moment I thought of Albert. I imagined him standing by the doorway, flower on his hands, pride in his eyes. "You did it, Mari," he would have said. "You came home to yourself." And maybe that's what rebirth really is. Not starting over, but coming home to the version of yourself that always deserved to live. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs. The night was quiet, and for the first time in years, so was my heart. Because this bakery, this peace, this freedom, wasn't a reward. It was a reclamation. A testament to every woman who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or used. A promise written in flour and fire. You are not too old. You are not too late. And you are not done yet. As I slipped into bed, the scent of bread still lingered in the air. Tomorrow, I would wake early, open the door, and begin again. Because every sunrise, every heartbeat, every quiet act of self-respect is proof that it's never too late to bloom.